The waiter in a snow-white shirt put a leather folder with the bill on the table, and I saw how my mother-in-law Valentina Pavlovna's eyes sparkled with some strange, almost triumphant light. 103,400 rubles, the waiter said with impeccable politeness. And at that moment my father-in-law Igor Mikhailovich theatrically slapped his jacket pockets. "Oh, Valyusha, I think I left my wallet at home," he exclaimed with such feigned confusion that I almost felt funny. Valentina Pavlovna immediately picked up, and I forgot my purse with cards. Here we are, old sclerotics. They looked at each other and laughed so falsely that I got goosebump skin. I sat opposite them at a table covered with empty plates from under oysters, lobsters, and other delicacies, which they ordered with such enthusiasm as if they were celebrating something other than my birthday and my own lottery win. I turned 30 today, a milestone that I was planning to celebrate modestly in the company of close friends, but the in-laws insisted on a family celebration in the most expensive restaurant in the city. "Ours Mashenka deserves the best," Valentina Pavlovna chirped when called me the day before. I tried to refuse, citing the fact that Andrei was in business trip and will not be able to attend, but she was adamant, especially. "You can't celebrate such a date alone." And now they were sitting in front of me with their hypocritical with smiles, expecting me, like an obedient daughter-in-law, to take out my card and pay a bill that was 3 times my monthly salary as a nurse. I slowly raised her eyes and looked first at Igor Mikhailovich, a larger man with sunken temples and the sallow face of a successful retired businessman. Then to Valentina Pavlovna, a well-groomed lady in an expensive dress from some fashion designer with impeccable hair and manicure. A pearl necklace glittered on her neck, a necklace which, as she liked to repeat, cost as much as a one-room apartment on the outskirts. "Mashenka, dear, you'll help us out." Valentina Pavlovna leaned towards me across the table, and I felt the suffocating smell of her French perfume. "We'll be there tomorrow morning. First of all, we'll give you everything back. It just turned out so stupid. We were in a hurry, that's why forgotten." Igor Mikhailovich nodded. Of course. We'll translate it for you tomorrow. The whole amount. You know we always keep our word." I knew. Oh, yes, I knew very well how they kept their word. I remembered last New Year, when they borrowed 50,000 from me for urgent needs and still haven't returned it. I remembered how they promised to help with the renovation of Andrei and my apartment, and then suddenly lost all the receipts and invoices. I remembered how Valentina Pavlovna wanted to give me family earrings for the wedding, but in the end she gave them cheap costume jewelry with the words, "Real jewelry must be earned." The waiter waited patiently at our table, occasionally glancing at his watch. The restaurant hall was not crowded. Only a few tables were occupied, and I felt the curious glances of other visitors. We probably looked quite comical. An elderly respectable couple and a young woman in a modest dress from a mass market, clearly not fitting into the interior with crystal chandeliers and velvet curtains. "But why are you silent, Masha?" Igor Mikhailovich's voice became a little harsher. "Are you really make us blush in front of all these people? We are your family." The last he pronounced the word with special emphasis, as if reminding me of some invisible obligations. Valentina Pavlovna threw up her hands. "Andriushenka will be so upset if finds out that you didn't help his parents in such an awkward situation." When I mentioned my husband, something in my chest ached. Andrei, my beloved, kind, but such a weak-willed Andrei, who still can't say no to his parents, who every time justifies their antics with the words, "Oh, come on, Masha, they're old people, they need to help." Who sincerely does not understand why I get upset when his mother isn't once again hinting that I am not good enough for their precious son. I looked at my hands, the hands of a nurse, accustomed to hard work, short nails without a manicure and a thin wedding ring, which Andrei and I chose in a modest jewelry store. Then she turned her gaze to Valentina Pavlovna's well-groomed hands, studded with diamond rings. On the ring finger was a particularly striking large stone, a gift from Igor Mikhailovich for their silver wedding. As she never tired of telling everyone. "I'll pay," I said very quietly, almost in a whisper. The faces of my in-laws instantly relaxed, and they exchanged a quick, triumphant glance. Valentina Pavlovna even allowed herself to condescendingly pat my hand. "That's a clever boy. I always told Andriusha that he was lucky with his wife, but I haven't yet finished." Raising my head and looking them straight in the eyes, I said clearly and distinctly, "I will pay Andrei's corporate card, the same one with which you regularly withdraw money, thinking that I don't know the PIN code." There was such silence that the sound of glasses clinking in the next room became audible. Valentina Pavlovna's face slowly changed color from pink to crimson, and then to some unhealthy gray shade. Igor Mikhailovich opened his mouth, but couldn't make a sound, just gasped for air like someone washed up on the shore fish. I took out of my bag a black card with gold embossing, the very one that Andrei kept it in the safe of his office, not suspecting that I had known the cat for a long time. Suspecting also that I know about how his parents regularly borrow from it money allegedly for treatment, charity, and other noble purposes. Where from? Where did you get it? Valentina Pavlovna finally found her voice, but her voice trembled. Andrei gave it. Calmly I lied before leaving on a business trip. I said that if you try again, put on one of his performances with forgotten wallets so that I would pay with this card and so that be sure to keep the receipt. It was a lie, of course. Andrei had no idea that I took the card. He didn't even know about today's dinner. I didn't do it on purpose. Tell him so as not to spoil the mood with an important presentation in Moscow. But his parents didn't know that. They only knew that there was money in the corporate account companies where Andrei works as a financial director. All transactions are recorded and are checked, and that spending on personal needs from this card is a criminal offense. You are not, you dare, Valentina Pavlovna hissed. But there was no longer any previous confidence. This is a setup. Did you set this up on purpose? I shook my head. I set it up. It was you who invited me to the restaurant. You ordered the most expensive dishes. You forgot your money at home. I'm just fulfilling my husband's request, paying the map he gave me. Igor Mikhailovich finally came to his senses. Listen, Masha, let's settle this as a family. Without unnecessary noise. We'll go now home, let's take the money. The restaurant closes in an hour. The waiter, who had been stood next to the stony face of a professional accustomed to family squabbles at expensive tables. And we do not accept cash payments over 100,000 rubles. Only card or transfer. That was not true. I saw a businessman paying for a banquet last week in bundles 5,000s, but the waiter was clearly on my side. Perhaps he, too, is tired of arrogant clients who like to put on a show. Valentina Pavlovna clutched the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. Okay, she muttered through her teeth. Teeth. How much do you want? Name your price. I raised my eyebrows in surprise. Price? For what? I'm not selling silence, Valentina Pavlovna. I just want normal human relations in the family. Without humiliation, without manipulation, without these your performances. Who are you anyway? The mother-in-law's voice broke into a shrill voice. Nurse, a poor nurse from the provinces. We brought you into the world. If it weren't for my son, you would still be in your village of Kausdala. Several visitors for the neighboring tables turned to the shout. The Metro Hotel, an elegant man in a tuxedo, walked towards our table with a worried look. I'm from Saratov, and I'm not from the village, I calmly corrected. I have a higher medical education, with honors and 8 years of experience in the cardiology department. I save people's lives every day, until you discuss new handbag collections with your girlfriends. And yes, I am from a simple family. My parents are teachers at school. They taught me honesty and integrity, everything that you apparently lack. Igor Mikhailovich tried to take control of the situation. Masha, why are you doing this? We didn't mean any harm. We just wanted to celebrate your holiday beautifully. Beautifully, I interrupted him. It's called beautifully order food for 100,000 and then pretend you forgot the money. You know what? Would it really be beautiful? If you just said, Masha, we want you congratulate, but we can only afford a modest dinner. I would appreciate it. Much more than this whole farce. Are you all right? The Maitre D Hotel came up to our table and looked at us with a professional, appraising glance. Can I help you with something? Valentina Pavlovna tried to put on a social smile. Everything is fine. Thank you. We are just discussing family matters. But the Metro Hotel did not leave, continuing to stand politely but persistently nearby. Obviously, the scenes were not uncommon in his restaurant, but he preferred to nip them in the bud. I handed the waiter my corporate card. The bill, please. Valentina Pavlovna jerked as if she wanted to snatch the card from my hands, but changed her mind under my attentive gaze. Maitre D Hotel. The waiter bowed and left, and I leaned back in my chair and looked on the in-laws. They sat like naughty children. Igor Mikhailovich nervously fiddled with his fingers. Napkin, and Valentina Pavlovna bit her lips, smearing her expensive lipstick. You know what's most offensive, I said, no longer hiding the bitterness in my voice. Because I really loved you. When Andrei first brought me to meet you, I was worried. I wanted you to like me so much. I remember baking an apple pie here, my grandmother's recipe. I stood in the kitchen for half a day, and you didn't even try it, said that you don't eat flour. But then I accidentally saw how you buy exactly the same pie at the confectionery for 3,000 rubles. Valentina Pavlovna winced. So what? We have the right to buy quality products in proven places. Of course you have, I nodded. As well as the right to treat me like a servant. Remember how you came to visit us when I broke my leg? I was in a cast, and you demanded, so that I could cook a 5-course meal because the lady of the house should be able to receive guests in any situation. Andrei was at work then and did not see how I was jumping around the kitchen on crutches. And you were sitting in the living room and discussing what kind of person I was. Incompetent. That was a long time ago, Igor Mikhailovich muttered. People change, right? I chuckled. And remember last month? When you came to us unannounced at 11 p.m., they woke up the neighbors and then made a scene because I opened the door in my robe. A decent woman should always be ready to receive guests. These are your words, Valentina Pavlovna. Waiter came back with a payment terminal. I entered the PIN code. Andrei's wedding date and me, whom his parents, by the way, never bothered to remember, constantly confusing it with some other dates. The device beeped, confirming the transaction, and the waiter handed me the check. I carefully folded it and put it in my purse under with the glaring glances of the in-laws. What are you going to do now? Valentina's voice Pavlovna sounded almost pleading. Will you tell Andrei? Will you make a scandal? I shook her head. Why? I'll just show him the receipt and say you insisted. To celebrate my birthday in an expensive restaurant, that you were so generous and magnanimous. He knows I don't have that kind of money. So you paid from his corporate account. The cards he supposedly gave me. And you know what happens next? They were silent, but I saw understanding blaze in their eyes. Andrei will start asking questions, I continued. Why did you use this particular card? Why not with your own money? And then all your loans for the last 3 years will pop up. Years. All transfers for the treatment of non-existent diseases, for charity, which ended up in your pockets, for urgent needs, which turned out to be a new fur coat or for hours. You won't prove anything. Valentina Pavlovna tried to pull herself together. This is our son. He will believe us. Perhaps. I agreed. And perhaps he finally opens the bank statements I've been carefully collecting all these years. Copies of receipts from stores where you bought things on the very days when they asked for money for the operation. Photos of your posts on social networks from Turkey, when you were supposedly in the hospital. Recordings of your conversations with your girlfriends, where you brag about how cleverly you give away your son and his fool of a wife. Igor Mikhailovich turned purple. You were recording us? The voice recorder is on your phone. Amazing. Thing, I shrugged. Especially when your mother-in-law likes to call and tell her friend Ludmila Petrovna what a loser her daughter-in-law is, and how good it is that her son, although would bring money home. By the way, Ludmila Petrovna is a lovely woman. I had a wonderful conversation with her when I was treating her granddaughter for pneumonia. She told me a lot of interesting things about your methods of raising Andrei. Valentina Pavlovna's eyes flashed with fear of what this gossip told you. Oh, lots of things. I smiled. Like how you made the little one Andriusha had to stand in the corner for several hours for the slightest innocence, as they took away from him all the gifts that other relatives gave him, explaining that he didn't want them deserved it, as they instilled in him that he should repay you his debt all his life for what you gave birth to him and raised him. You know, a lot has become clear in his behavior after these stories. We raised him as best we could. Igor flared up Mikhailovich. In severity, yes, but look at what he has become. A successful man, the financial director of a large company who still cannot make an independent decision without approval mommies, I retorted, who apologized for being late work, who is afraid to spend an extra penny on himself, because his parents may be needed. You know that he has been saving for 3 years already car, but each time it gives you the savings because you have another urgent needs. Valentina Pavlovna nervously adjusted her pearl necklace. We force him. He himself offers to help. After you have been an hour you tell him how sick and unhappy you are, I asked. I can hear your phone conversations. Oh, Andriushenka. Dad's heart is seizing up again. The doctors say he needs a deer operation. And then Igor Mikhailovich calmly plays tennis with his friends and drinks cognac, which is contraindicated for heart patients. Enough, Igor Mikhailovich barked, loudly enough that an elderly lady in a fur cape at the next table shuddered. Stop digging into our family. Yes, we are not perfect parents. Yes, we sometimes exaggerate our problems, but we have the right to support our son. Support? I shook my head. You confuse support with parasitism. Do you know what normal help is like? Parents from what you do. Normal parents are embarrassed to ask money from children, and you demand it as a matter of course. The Metro Hotel again headed towards our table, clearly concerned by the raised voices. Valentina Pavlovna noticed him approaching and tried to pull herself together. Okay, Masha, what do you want? We are ready to negotiate. It sounded almost like a capitulation, and I felt a strange satisfaction. Finally, this haughty woman, 3 years poisoning my life, recognized me as her equal, even if it was forced. I want simple things, I said, looking her straight in the eyes. So that you stop manipulate Andrei, so that they stop pumping money out of him under far-fetched pretexts, so that they would treat me with respect, not as a servant or a gold digger, but as to your son's wife. And to return all the money that was taken over the last 3 years. All the money. Valentina Pavlovna choked with indignation. Are you crazy? This is almost 2,347,000, I clarified. I have the exact calculations. You can check it on your bank statements. And that's just what you can document it. Not counting the cash that Andrei gave you from hand to hand. Igor Mikhailovich leaned back heavily in his chair. We don't have that kind of money. It's not true, I objected. You have an apartment in the center, which you rent out for 200,000 a month. You have a dacha in the Moscow region that you don't use and could sell. There is that same late model Mercedes that you bought last year when Andrei gave you the money allegedly for Valentina Pavlovna's treatment in Germany. How do you know all this? She whispered. Mother-in-law. Her face became completely pale, and her hands trembled slightly. I have a friend at the tax office, I explained calmly. It's amazing what interesting things can be learned about people who like to live large, but taxes are paid as pensioners. By the way, did you know that concealing income from renting out real estate, is that an article? There was a heavy pause. I saw how they look at each other, trying to find a way out of the situation, but there was no way out. I was well prepared for this conversation. 3 years of humiliation, 3 years of silence swallowing grievances taught me patience and the ability to wait for the right moment. And this moment has come. Good. Igor Mikhailovich finally squeezed out of himself. We'll figure something out, we'll gradually pay back the debt, but you have to promise that you won't tell Andrei. I won't tell, I nodded. On one condition. You write a receipt for the debt indicating the exact amount and terms of repayment and have it certified by a notary. This is blackmail, Valentina squealed. Pavlovna, but immediately stopped short under the stern gaze of the approaching Metro Hotel. Excuse me, he said to me, clearly choosing me as the most adequate person at the table. But we have to ask you to leave the establishment. Are you disturbing other guests? I stood up, taking the purse. Of course, sorry for the inconvenience. We are leaving now. The in-laws followed behind me, and we silently headed towards the exit under the attentive gaze of the staff and visitors. At the door, Valentina Pavlovna tried to take me by the arm, feigning family idol, but I gently freed myself. It was drizzling outside, and the lights the cities blurred into multicolored blots on the wet asphalt. Where is your car? Igor Mikhailovich asked. I came by taxi, I answered. No, I like driving in the rain. We'll give you a lift, Valentina suddenly suggested. Pavlovna. There was an unusual uncertainty in her voice. No thanks, I took out my phone to call a taxi. I'll go home and pick it up. Bath and go to bed. It's been a long day. Masha, wait. Igor Mikhailovich did step towards me. We really didn't want anything bad. We just got used to living in a certain way. Maybe we really did go too far. Maybe B. I smiled sadly. You know, I don't want money and I don't revenge. I just want a normal family so that we can get together for the same table without these games and manipulations, so that you see me as a person and not ATM or servants. Valentina Pavlovna lowered her eyes. We'll think about it. In your words. Think about it, I nodded, and decide what is more important to you, money or son, because sooner or later Andrei will find out the truth, and then he will do it himself choice. And considering how you raised him, I'm afraid this choice will not be yours. Benefit. A taxi pulled up. An ordinary white car with checkered markings, abruptly contrasting with my in-laws' shiny Mercedes parked nearby. As I got into the car, I turned around. They were standing in the rain, two middle-aged men people in expensive clothes who suddenly looked lost and miserable. Valentina Pavlovna got wet, and a perfect hairstyle turned into wet strands of hair stuck to his forehead. Igor Mikhailovich slouched, and all his important the look of a successful businessman disappeared somewhere. Goodbye, I said through open window. And happy birthday to me. Thank you for an unforgettable evening. The taxi started moving, and I leaned back in her seat, feeling strangely empty. A victory, if you could call it that. Victory did not bring the expected satisfaction. Instead of triumph, I felt only tiredness and sadness. The driver, a young guy of about 20, looked at me in the rearview mirror. It's been a tough day. Birthday, I replied. 30 years. Oh, congratulations, he smiled sincerely. Although something is not, it looks like you were celebrating. Celebrating, I chuckled. Relatives. You know how it is? He nodded understandingly. Oh, yes, I know. My mother-in-law is like that it would be better to dine with enemies. Always demanding something. Always dissatisfied. Either I don't earn enough, or I have the wrong car, or we rent an apartment in the wrong place. And how when it comes to help, she immediately has no money, no time, and in general they are to blame for all the problems themselves. I couldn't help but smile at his frankness. And how are you coping? Not at all, he answered cheerfully. Wife said, either me or mommy. Mother-in-law chose mommy. Now we see each other once a month, and that's if you're lucky. But your nerves are intact, and there's peace in the family. Your wife is wise. Woman, I noted. That's true, the driver agreed. She suffered for 3 years, and then she hit the truth. My mother-in-law still can't come to her senses, but no longer interferes with our lives. We were driving through the evening city, and I was looking at the lights floating by. Somewhere there, in one of Moscow's business hotels, my husband was sleeping, unaware of today's drama. Tomorrow he will return tired, but satisfied with the successful presentation. He'll hug me, ask how my birthday went, and I'll answer that everything was fine okay. I'll answer like this for now, and then I'll tell the truth someday. But not now. It's not worth it. Spoil his mood after an important work victory. The phone vibrated. A message came in. I reluctantly glanced at the screen, expecting to see more threats or pleas from fathers-in-law. But the message was from Andrei, my love. The presentation went great. The contract is ours. That means a bonus and a raise. Now we can finally move out of here. Parents and rent a normal apartment. Happy birthday to you, sunshine. Tomorrow we will celebrate for real. I reread the message several times, believing my eyes. Move out from my parents. We've been living separately for 3 years already. Ilya. Oh God. Did Andrei really think all this time that we were living with his parents? But how? They just come to visit often. Sometimes they stay overnight. Although, if you think about it, sometimes turned into always. They even have keys, and they come in whenever they want. Where are we going? The driver asked, slowing down at traffic lights. I gave the address and looked at my phone again. I typed the answer to Andrei. Congratulations, dear. I am so happy for you. I can't wait for your returns. Sent and thought. So he, too, was tired of the constant presence of parents. This means he understands that things can't go on like this any longer. Maybe today's scandal was not in vain. Blessed silence greeted me at home. No Valentina Pavlovna with her eternal nagging. No Igor Mikhailovich, occupying the sofa and demanding beer. Just my house, my things, my life. I took off her shoes, went into the kitchen and put the kettle on. In the fridge a piece of cake was found. My colleagues congratulated me at work and arranged a small celebration in the staff room. Sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and cake, I thought about the day that had passed. 30 years a serious date. Time to sum things up, make plans for the future. What am I? Do I have a favorite job, even if it's not the highest paid? A husband who loves me, even if he can't protect me from his parents? Roof above your head, albeit a removable one. Not crowded, but not empty either. The phone vibrated again. This time the message was from an unknown number. Masha, this is Ludmila Petrovna, Valentina's friend. She just called me in tears, told about your conflict. I want to say, you are great. It was high time put them in their place. I've told Valia 100 times that she's going too far, but where to? If support or testimony is needed, contact me. You now have my number. I smiled. An unexpected support from a man I had only met a couple of times in my life. So I wasn't the only one who noticed how my in-laws are behaving. It means there are people who are ready to take my side. This gave me strength and confidence. Having finished my tea, I went to the bathroom. The water washed away the stress of the day, and I allowed myself to cry a little. Not from resentment or anger, simply from fatigue, from having to fight with people who were supposed to become a second family. Because instead of support, you only get demands and reproaches. But the tears quickly dried up. I'm not one of those who pity himself for a long time. Tomorrow will be a new day, Andrew will come, and together we will decide how to live on. Perhaps his parents will draw the right conclusions from today's conversation. Maybe not. In any case, I gave them understand that I no longer intend to tolerate their antics. Wrapping myself in a robe, I went into the bedroom and took a photo from a nightstand. Andrew and I on our wedding day. Young, happy, full of hope. He looked at me with such love that my heart sank. And I knew that this love was worth fighting for, worth overcoming difficulties, solve problems, seek compromises, but do not allow yourself to be turned into a victim. Having settled into bed, I took phone to set an alarm and saw another message. This time from Valentina Pavlovna. Masha, let's meet tomorrow and talk. Calm down. Without Igor, it's just the two of us. I want everything fixed. Please. I've been looking at this message for a long time. Part of me wanted to refuse. I had enough of their talk. But another part reminded me that this was my husband, that for Andrew's sake it's worth at least trying to improve the relationship. After all, I'm not a monster. I'm ready to give them a second chance, but only one. Okay, I typed. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the cafe on Sadovaya. But keep in mind, this is the last attempt. If you start manipulating or putting on a show again, I'll tell Andrew everything and I'll show him all the evidence I've collected. I sent it and turned off the phone. That's enough for emotions today. As I was falling asleep, I was thinking that every day birth is a little death and a new birth. The old version of you dies, a new one is born. Today Masha died, who silently endured humiliation and swallowed insults. Masha was born, who knows how to defend herself and her interests. And you know what? I like this new me. The morning started with a call alarm clock and the aroma of coffee. I brewed it for 2 out of habit, forgetting that Andrew was in business trip. Finishing my second cup, I looked at the news on my phone. The world lived its own life. Somewhere there were wars, somewhere there were catastrophes, somewhere people rejoiced and grieved. And I had just a new day after turning 30. At work, my colleagues met me smiles and questions about yesterday's celebration. Celebrated in style, I answered evasively. In an expensive restaurant with my in-laws. You're lucky with in-laws, sighed the nurse of light. Mine would never have forked out for restaurant. I just smiled back. If only she knew. The workday flew by. Unnoticed. 2 surgeries, a detour, a bunch of paperwork. It's good to have a favorite thing that distracts from personal problems. Saving other people's lives, you forget about your own troubles. By 2 o'clock I had changed and headed to meet Valentina Pavlovna. The cafe on Sadovaya was small and cozy. I deliberately chose neutral territory. The mother-in-law was already waiting at a table by the window. She looked unwell, pale, with dark circles under her eyes, without the usual perfect makeup. She was even dressed simply. No designer outfits. A regular mass-market suit. Thank you for coming, she said, when I sat down opposite. I didn't sleep all night. I thought, and to what conclusions have you arrived? I ordered green tea from the waitress and prepared to listen. Valentina Pavlovna nervously fiddled with her napkin. You know, Masha, I wasn't always like this. Once upon a time I was young too, in love, full of hope. She worked as a primary school teacher. By the way, she adored children. I raised my eyebrows in surprise. It was hard to imagine the haughty Valentina Pavlovna in the role of a teacher. She noticed my surprise and sadly smiled. Yes, imagine. She worked at the school for 20 years. And then Igor started his own business. Things were going well, and he asked me to quit my job. He said, "Why should the wife of a successful businessman bother with other people's children for pennies?" And I left. And then the business went bust, but it was too late to go back. Pride wouldn't let me. "Why are you doing this to me?" "Are you telling me?" I asked, sipping my tea. "Because I want you to understand that I know what it's like work for a small salary. I know what it's like to count every penny. It's just that later, when Igor's affairs got back on track, I was like off the chain. I broke down. I wanted everything at once. Expensive things, restaurants, travel. I wanted to prove to everyone that I was worth something. And they proved it at the expense of my son, I noticed." Valentina Pavlovna lowered her eyes. "Yes. And that was wrong. I understand it now. You know, yesterday, when we got home, Igor said one thing to me. He said that we could lose our son, that Andrei would sooner or later will get tired of our demands late and simply stop communicating. And I scared, really scared." The waitress brought her coffee, and Valentina Pavlovna nodded gratefully. Taking a sip, she continued, "I'm a bad mother. It hurts. Admit it 60, but it's true. I manipulated my son, used him feelings for a long time. I suggested that he was obliged to me. And you know what the worst thing is? I did to him the same thing my mother did to me. It was unexpected. Confession, and I silently waited for him to continue. My mother was a powerful woman. Valentina Pavlovna looked out the window as if she saw the past there. She controlled my every step, decided who should I be friends with, what to wear, where to study. I even married Igor, because she liked him, a promising young man from a good family. And I swore to myself that with my I'll be different as a child. And in the end, we repeated her mistakes. I finished for her. She nodded, yes, and even worse, because at least I didn't pump it out of my mother money. And Igor and I, oh my God, Masha, I'm so ashamed. We behaved like the last one's parasites, and they even dared to condemn you, calling you a gold digger. Although we were the real gold diggers, I didn't know what to answer. On the one hand, it was nice to hear the confession and apology. On the other hand, too much water had flowed under the bridge. Too many grievances have accumulated. Valentina Pavlovna, I began cautiously. I appreciate your candor. True, but you see, it's not just about money. The thing about the relationship is that you didn't see me as a person, and an annoying addition to your son. Do you know why I treated you like that? She looked up at me, and I was surprised to see tears in them. You reminded me of myself when I was young, goal-oriented, hard-working, and independent. Everything I once was and lost. And I was jealous, banal, vulgarly envied. And envy is a bad advisor. We were silent, each one immersed in her own thoughts. Then Valentina Pavlovna climbed into purse and took out an envelope. There's 500,000 in cash. That's all I could muster. Per night. I'll return the rest within 6 months. I give you my word. And I want to ask you forgive me for everything, for the humiliation, for the manipulation, for yesterday's performance. Forgive me, Masha. I took the envelope without even looking inside. The money was important, but they were the main thing. The main thing was that this proud woman finally acknowledged her mistakes. And judging by her look, this admission did not come easy to her. I will accept your apologies, I said slowly, but with conditions. First of all, no more manipulations, no more loans, no more tears about non-existent diseases. Secondly, respect for me, for my work, to my choice. Thirdly, personal boundaries, calls on agreements, visits by invitation. I agree to everything, she nodded quickly, Valentina Pavlovna. And also, Masha, I want to ask you for a favor. Teach me how to work again. I mean, help me find a job. I mean, only 60. I can still be useful. Maybe not at school, but somewhere else. I don't want to depend on Igor anymore. I don't want to beg for money from my son. I want to go back, become human. It was a turn I didn't expect. Valentina Pavlovna, who always boasted of her status as the wife of a successful businessman, wanted to work. You seriously? I asked. Absolutely. There was determination in her voice. Yesterday the evening showed me a lot. Showed me what I have become. And I don't like this woman. I want to change, but I don't know where to start. Can you help? I thought. On the one hand, this could be another manipulative move. On the other hand, in her there was a sincerity in his eyes that was hard to do. Okay, I decided. We have the hospital has a volunteer program. They need people who read to patients. They help with simple procedures and simply communicate with lonely old people. There is no payment, but it is a good start to get back to an active life. Valentina Pavlovna's face brightened. A volunteer at the hospital. I never about this, I didn't think so. But that's a great idea. I love reading. I can read to patients and I know how to communicate when I'm not showing off. She smiled shyly. And in that smile I suddenly saw the young teacher she once was. We talked for another hour. Valentina Pavlovna talked about her youth, about dreams that never came true, fears that made her cling for status and money. I talked about my work, about patients, about why I chose medicine. To my surprise, the conversation turned out to be easy and sincere. For the first time in 3 years we spoke like two adults, not like feuding people. Sides. You know, Masha, Valentina Pavlovna said when we were about to leave. I'm glad that Andrei chose you. I'm really glad. You are strong, smart, principled. You didn't let us turn you into a victim. And you love my son for real, not for money or status. I'm sorry I did that. I haven't seen this for a long time. The sun was shining outside and the city seemed festive. We said goodbye at the cafe door. Restrainedly, but warmly. Valentina Pavlovna promised come to the hospital on Monday to find out about the volunteer program. I promised to meet her and show her everything. As we went our separate ways, we both understood that this was only the beginning of a long journey. But at least a start had been made. In the evening Andrei returned, tired but beaming with joy. Mashka, he picked up me in his arms right in the hallway. We did it. A contract for 50 million. The bonus will be amazing. Now we'll definitely rent a normal apartment, away from my parents. I hugged him, inhaling the familiar scent. Speaking of I started with my parents, but he put his finger to my lips. Then first I want to celebrate your birthday. Close your eyes. I obediently closed them, and he led me into the living room. Open up. There was a huge cake on the table with 30 candles. There was a small box lying nearby. Late on one day, but still happy birthday, my love. In the box were earrings, simple, elegant, with small sapphires. I know you don't like black ones. Jewelry, Andrei said sheepishly. But I wanted to give you something beautiful. You deserve beautiful things, Mash. You deserve all the best. The best. I tried on the earrings while looking in the mirror. They fit perfectly, not flashy but sophisticated. They're beautiful. I turned to my husband. Thank you, dear, for the gift, for the holiday, for being there. We kissed, and the world around ceased to exist. There were only the two of us, without fathers-in-law, no problem, no hard feelings. Over dinner, Andrei talked about the presentation, about new prospects, about plans for the future. I listened, rejoicing at his success. Then, when the emotions had calmed down a bit, she told me about yesterday's dinner. Not everything. Just that my parents invited me to a restaurant and insisted on paying the bill, and that met with his mother today. Mom wants to become a volunteer. Andrei almost choked on his tea. My mother, who has been doing nothing but I did what I did. I went to beauty salons and gossiped with my friends. People change. I shrugged. Maybe she's just tired of being useless? After all, 60 years is not a death sentence. Many at this age are only they start to live for real. Andrei shook his head thoughtfully. You know, my mother was different when she was young. I remember how she took me to school, how she helped with homework, how she organized holidays for the whole class. And then her father became rich, and she seemed to change. She became important, arrogant, demanding. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time for her to remember who she was. We talked for a long time that evening about family, about the future, about plans. Andrei suggested really rent an apartment away from parents, not because of conflict, but simply so that everyone has more privacy space. I agreed. Distance sometimes helps to maintain relationships are better than constant intimacy. On Monday, Valentina Pavlovna actually came to hospital. Modestly dressed, without her usual makeup and jewelry, she looked younger and somehow softer. I introduced her to the volunteer program coordinator, an energetic woman in her 50s who enthusiastically spoke about what the volunteers do. Are you a teacher? Great. The coordinator was delighted. We have a whole department with children who spend a long time in hospital. They really miss activities and communication. If you are ready to work with them, it will be a real gift. Valentina Pavlovna beamed. Children, I will be happy to work with them. I watched as my mother-in-law fills out forms, listens to instructions, receives a volunteer badge. In her eyes, there was a light burning that I had never seen before. The light of a man who had found his calling, or, more precisely, returning to it after a long break. A week later I met her in children's department. Valentina Pavlovna sat surrounded by children and read to them fairy tale. The children listened with their mouths open. She read artistically, changing her voices with expression for different characters. When she saw me, she waved her hand, but did not interrupt it. I finished reading the chapter. How are you? I asked when the children ran off to their rooms. Wonderful. Her face was glowing. You know, I forgot what it's like to be needed. These kids, they're so grateful. Yesterday one girl drew me a postcard. Can you imagine? She wrote thank you Aunt Valia for the fairy tales. I almost burst into tears. In the following week, Valentina Pavlovna was transformed before our eyes. She came to hospital almost every day, worked with children, read to lonely old people, helped nurses with simple tasks. A haughty lady in expensive clothes turned into a warm-hearted woman who was adored by patients. Igor Mikhailovich at first he grumbled about how his wife worked for free, and in a hospital at that, but then he resigned himself and even began to be proud. My Valia is now a volunteer. It helps the children. True, we solved the money issue separately. Valentina Pavlovna, honestly, I paid off the debt in installments by selling some of my jewelry. Our relationship gradually improved. Not right away, not easily, but things were getting better. Valentina Pavlovna learned to call before the visit, stopped criticizing my choice of clothes or cooking. I learned to see in her not only an evil mother-in-law, but also a woman with her own fears and complexes. One day, about 3 months after that memorable birthday, we were sitting in hospital canteen. Valentina Pavlovna came running to share her joy. One of her ward boys finally started to recover after a difficult operation. Today he smiled, she said, and her eyes sparkled with happiness. For the first time in 2 weeks he smiled and asked to read about Harry Potter. You've changed, I said, looking at her. Changed a lot. She nodded. You know, Masha, that evening in the restaurant. It became like a cold shower. I suddenly saw myself from the outside, a greedy, lying old woman, extorting money from my own son, and I felt so disgusted, so ashamed. Thank you, that opened my eyes. I was just defending myself, I answered honestly, but I'm glad that everything turned out this way. And I'm glad that I have such a daughter-in-law. Valentina Pavlovna unexpectedly took me by the hand. Strong, honest, principled. Andrei was lucky. And I was lucky, although I didn't realize it right away. We finished our tea and went to their departments. She to the children. I to the cardiology department. Passing by the children's department an hour later, I looked into the ward. Valentina Pavlovna was sitting on the edge of the bed, the boy himself, and read about the adventures of the young wizard. The child listened, holding him to his chest. A toy owl. And my mother-in-law read it with such an expression as if she herself believed in it magic. And you know what? Looking at them, I also believed. Believed that people can change, that it's never too late to start over, that sometimes you just need to muster up the courage to tell the truth quietly but clearly. And then even the most seemingly hopeless conflict can turn into a new beginning. That evening day Andrei met me after work. We walked through the autumn park, rustling fallen leaves, and he was talking about a new project. Then he suddenly stopped and hugged me. Thank you. For what? I was surprised. For Mom. I don't know what you told her then, but she became a different person. She called yesterday and spent an hour talking about her children in the hospital. I'm so happy I haven't had her for a long time heard. I pressed myself against my husband, feeling the warmth of his embrace. The autumn wind ruffled in the hair. Somewhere in the distance, music was playing, and life seemed wonderful, not perfect. There were still complications, problems, misunderstandings with her, but it was beautiful because it contained love, work that had meaning, and a family that learned to be a real family. A story that began with a scandal in an expensive restaurant unexpectedly turned into a story of forgiveness and new beginnings. About how sometimes you need to hit the bottom to push off and float up. About how pride and prejudice can give way to a sincere desire to change. A year passed. We celebrated my 31st birthday in a completely different way. No expensive restaurants, just a family dinner at home. Valentina Pavlovna baked that very apple pie using my grandmother's recipe. It turned out that I still remembered the recipe the first time. Igor Mikhailovich gave me a book on cardiology, which I have long wanted. Simple, sincere gifts from people who became a real family. At the table, Valentina Pavlovna talked about her ward's Igor Mikhailovich about his new passion for gardening. It turned out that retirement is a great time to discover new talents. Andrei held me hand and smiled, looking at his parents. And I thought about how strange it is sometimes life turns. For Masha, Igor Mikhailovich raised his glass to our dear daughter-in-law, who taught us to be human. We clinked glasses, and in that clink of glasses there was more sincerity than in all those pompous toasts in an expensive restaurant a year ago back. After dinner, when the in-laws left on time and on their own initiative, Andrei hugged me. You know, I'm proud of you. You could have hated them after everything that was. You could have broken off the relationship, forbidden them from communicating with future grandchildren. But you gave them a second chance. It takes a lot of spirit or a lot of stupidity, I chuckled. No, he shook his head. This is wisdom, the ability to forgive without forgetting, to give to people opportunities to improve. My mother became a volunteer thanks to you. My father stopped throwing money around and found a hobby. They both seemed to grow younger, to find meaning life. And all this thanks to one phrase said at the right time. I thought about it, going to bed. One phrase can really change your life, can destroy a relationship or, on the contrary, become the beginning of something new. The main thing, find the right words and say them at the right moment. Quietly but clearly, without no screaming, no hysterics, no insults. Just the truth that sometimes heals better than any medicine. I smiled as I fell asleep. Tomorrow will be a new day. Valentina Pavlovna will come to the hospital to read to the children fairy tales. Igor Mikhailovich will dig in his garden. Andrei will go to work, where new projects and new heights await him. And I will save lives, just like always. The ordinary life of ordinary people. But in this ordinariness there is happiness, quiet, soft, real. The happiness of understanding, forgiveness of the second chance. The happiness of a family that has learned to be a family not in words, but in deeds. And it all started with one unfortunate birthday and a phrase uttered very quietly but clearly. Sometimes big changes don't require big words. Sometimes it's enough to just tell the truth and let people hear it. And then it's up to them. To change or to stay the same, to lend a hand or turn away, become a family or remain strangers. We chose the first and never once did not regret it. After another 6 months, something happened that I had been waiting for a long time, but I was afraid to hope. 2 stripes on the test, confirming the blood test. The first ultrasound. Congratulations, you're having a baby, the doctor said, and I burst into tears right there in the office. Andrei, who insisted on coming with me, squeezed my hand so tightly that his knuckles turned white. We are going to be parents, he whispered. And in his voice there was so much happiness that I wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. We walk home, although the journey was not short. We wanted to walk, hold hands, digest this news. How will we tell our parents? Andrei asked. Maybe for now shall we wait? It's the first trimester after all. But I could see how he wanted to share joy with the whole world. Let's say, I decided. Your mother has changed so much over this year. I think she'll be a great grandma. We invited the in-laws to dinner. On the weekend. Valentina Pavlovna came straight from the hospital, still in volunteer badge. Sorry, I'm late. She quickly took off her jacket. One of my wards today could not fail to be discharged. Can you imagine? The boy spent 6 months in the hospital, and now he's going home. Her eyes were shining, and I once again was amazed by the changes in this woman. During dinner, Andrei kept trying to tell news, but I stopped him. I wanted to find the right moment. And he found himself when Valentina Pavlovna suddenly said, "You know, today I was working in the children's department and I thought how wonderful it would be to babysit my grandchildren. But that's for you, I won't push you to decide, of course." She smiled shyly, and Igor Mikhailovich nodded. We weren't the best parents, but maybe we'll be better as grandparents. Andrei didn't survive. Actually, you will have a chance to check it out. In about 7 months. Silence reigned. Valentina Pavlovna slowly lowered her fork. What? What are you said? You will have a grandson or granddaughter. I smiled. We found out this week. What happened next, I didn't expect. Valentina Pavlovna stood up, walked around the table and hugged me tightly, like a mother, like I've never hugged before. My dear Mashenka, this is happiness. She cried, not embarrassed by her tears, and Igor Mikhailovich patted his son on the shoulder and repeated, "Wow. This is news." The next months flew by in one day. Valentina Pavlovna turned into the most caring mother-in-law in the world, but caring in moderation. She asked permission before giving advice, brought useful books about pregnancy, having first clarified whether I needed them. I knitted tiny booties in my free time from volunteering. I knit for children in the hospital, she explained. I'll also get my hand in for my grandson. Igor Mikhailovich also transformed. He began making children's furniture with his own hands. It turned out that he had a talent for working with wood. Buy-made wood is boring, he said, sanding another detail of the future crib. And here with soul, with love. The grandson will know that his grandfather I tried for him with my own hands. In the 7th month of pregnancy I got to preservation. Nothing serious, just a precaution. But spending 2 weeks in the hospital, where work, it turned out to be quite a challenge. Colleagues looked in every 5 minutes, and Andrei was on duty at the ward like a faithful dog. And then something unexpected happened. Valentina Pavlovna asked to come to my room. I know we agreed on the boundaries, she began, sitting down on the edge of the bed. But I thought, maybe you bored here alone? I could read you something or just chat, or keep quiet if you want. There was such genuine concern in her voice that my eyes stung. Read, I asked. Something kind and light. She read to me every day, came after her volunteer shift and read classics, contemporary prose, even detective stories when I asked something lighter. Sometimes we discussed what we had read. Sometimes we just sat in cozy silence. Over these 2 weeks we became really close. Not my mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, but 2 women who have something to talk about. You know, Masha, she said. She once, closing the book. I thought a lot about that evening in the restaurant and realized one thing. You saved not only our relationship. You saved me from that the terrible woman I became gave me back my meaning in life, my job, respect for yourself. And now you'll also give me a grandson. How can I thank you? Just be who you are now, I replied. That's enough. She nodded, and we went back to reading. It was snowing outside. The room was warm and cozy, and the baby was kicking under me, reminding me of his imminent arrival light.